Australia, officially the Commonwealth of Australia, is a country comprising of the mainland of the Australian continent, the island of Tasmania, and numerous smaller islands. It is the world's sixth largest country by total area. It's broken up into 6 states: New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania, Victoria, and Western Australia. Australia is a product of a unique blend of established traditions and new influences. The country's original inhabitants, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, are the upholders of one of the world's oldest continuing cultural traditions. They have been living in Australia for at least 40,000 years and possibly up to 60,000 years. Since 1945, more than 7 million people have come to Australia as new settlers. The trigger for a large-scale migration was the end of World War II. Australia must populate or perish, so hundreds of thousands of displaced Europeans migrated to there. Today, Australia has a population of nearly 23 million people. In 2009, about 25% of the estimated population comprised of those born overseas, from about 200 countries since Great Britain established the first European settlement in the late 18th century. Many of the people who come to Australia since 1945 were motivated by a commitment to a family or a desire to escape poverty, war, or persecution. The first waves of immigrants and refugees came mostly from Europe. Subsequent waves have come from the Asia-Pacific region, the Middle East, and Africa. Migrants have enriched almost every aspect of Australian life, but have also adapted to Australia's tolerant, casual, and broadly equal society. Even though they come from their own country with their own customs, immigrants seem to assimilate into Australia comfortably, allowing a very slight difference between immigrants and natives in several aspects. Work. In the simplest terms, Australia is an egalitarian society. This doesn't mean that everyone is the same or equal, but it does mean that there are no formal class distinctions in Australian society. Australia's workplace laws require employers to ensure that employees have basic rights in the workplace. Everyone in Australia is protected by Australian laws, not just native citizens. Although immigration is creating ethnic stratification in Australian society, this basically means a system of structured inequality is being created in which people receive different amounts of society's resources based on their ethnic group. Therefore, the more immigrants that arrive, the more cheap labor for employers. For example, Anglo-Australians, still almost 70% of the population, are presently being displaced by the professional and senior managerial positions by Asian immigrants and their children. Australian trade unions have sometimes exposed attempts by employers to introduce foreign workers into the country in order to avoid paying local workers and higher wages. This image is in an Australian government poster issued by the Overseas Settlement Office to attract immigrants in 1928. It's easy to compare the way immigrants look at the US to how immigrants look at Australia because both were considered lands of opportunity. This image shows the average age of immigrants coming from different countries, typically ranging from late 20s to late 60s, which proves they mostly came to find new work or escape some type of government issue. Marriage. Considering the easy assimilation of immigrants into Australian culture, marriage was pretty universal throughout and extremely similar to the concepts of marriage we know and practice today in the US. The only time it would vary would be if those immigrants decided to continue their native culture in Australia, which they were more than free to do, but it wasn't as common. Marriage occurs with a civil or religious ceremony conducted by a registered official and can take place in any public or private location. This ceremony usually is followed by a celebration with food, drink, and music. Guests will as well provide gifts of household goods or money, and the parents of the couple often make a substantial contribution to the cost of the wedding. Typically, no other official exchange of dowries occur nowadays. Divorce has been readily available since 1975 and involves little shame. It simply requires a 1-year separation period and occurs in approximately 40% of first marriages. Upon divorce, the husband and wife agree to divide their mutual property and child-rearing responsibilities. Law courts and mediators sometimes assist with this process. Remarriage is common and accepted, although homosexual couples are not recognized by law as married regardless of a long-term relationship. This picture displays the avid protests that occurred in Australia. Even though not allowed, people will continue to fight for their rights. This map shows where they will allow gay marriage around the world, and clearly Australia falls under the bill's proposed category, whereas countries like the US are labeled as recognized in some states. Gender roles. Women tend to be associated with private domain, unpaid work, and the home, while men tend to be associated with the public domain, paid work, and the larger society. This division was particularly evident in the early years of settlement, when the free settler women were seen as homemakers who brought respect to the male population. Migrant women have been valued for their ability to create settled families and generally have entered the country as dependents. Traditionally, occupation has been sex segregated, with women prevailing as domestics and in the caring professions such as teaching and nursing. Overall, women earn on average less than men do and spend more time than men doing unpaid domestic work. However, sex discrimination and affirmative action policies since the late 1970s have been directed toward promoting gender equality in all spheres. As a consequence, there have been increases in women's participation in secondary and higher education, as well as in the general workforce, and an increase in availability of childcare. As immigrants come to this country for new opportunities, they find any work they can and basically begin a new life here in any way possible. Therefore, their collaboration with gender roles is very smooth, and there are identity roles they must fit in, as everyone is equal. This picture basically shows the difference in male and female duties, where the men are more professionals and the women specialize in administration. Religion. The Constitution guarantees religious freedom, and while there is no official national religion, Australia generally is described as a Christian country. British colonists brought the Anglican belief system in 1788, and three-quarters of the population continue to identify with some form of Christianity, predominantly the Catholic and Anglican faiths. Many faiths are represented, with significant numbers of Muslims, Buddhists, Jews, and Hindus. Therefore, extensive immigration has made Australia one of the most religiously diverse societies in the world, as people are free to practice and share their beliefs in this country. Clothing. The types of clothing that people wear reflect the diversity in the society just as much as the variation in climate. There are no laws or rules on clothing, but you must wear certain clothing for work situations. Most workplaces have dress standards. Outside of the work situation, clothing is an individual choice. Many people dress for comfort, for the social condition, or the weather. Clubs, movie theaters, and other places require people to be in neat, clean clothes and appropriate footwear. Many Australians live close to the beach and the sea, so on hot days they may wear little clothing on areas such as the beach. This does not mean that people who dress to go to the beach or swimming have low moral standards. It means that this is what they accept on and near beaches, similarly to our own culture. People from other countries can choose to wear their national dress. They may be religious or customary items and include a monk's robe, a burqa, a hijab, or a turban. As a tolerant society with people from many different cultures, clothing is a part of a cultural belief and practices that is encouraged in this society. This picture shows sisters that have emigrated from Bangladesh that choose to wear their cultural dress. I also found it interesting that scientists have suggested that immigrants who wear their native clothing have a boost in their mental health.